Hi, it's Sandy Parker, and welcome to Crafting for Almost Everyone. Today we have a viewer request, and that is that I do a comparison of inexpensive watercolor papers, and so I'm going to be testing out 4 different papers with 8 different watercolor mediums, and I hope you'll stay tuned. The first thing I want to go over are the mediums I'm going to be using. The first thing is the paints we're going to be using, and that is, we're going least expensive to most expensive. I have my prices. I'll get this out of the way so you can see my prices. The Crayola watercolor paints for a set of 8 right now at Target.com are $1.99. So we're going to try those out. Then we're going to try out these Niji Yasotomo pearlescent watercolor paints. I'm sorry if I hacked that up. I really apologize. It's a set of 16 of these, 3, 6, 9, and this is a bigger set, but Amazon had this set of 16 for $6.62. I bought mine at Hobby Lobby, and I have a bigger set, and I know I paid less than that. So, word to the wise, if you can go to a Hobby Lobby, you're better off. Then I have the big set of Kuretake Gansai watercolors. There's a set of 36 of them for $29.38 at Amazon.com. I have a video on why I made these swatches. They have a little swatch, we'll call it, on the top of the box, and I'll show you that. I didn't like it because it was teeny tiny, and I figured I'd have to be finding the box every time I did anything. So instead, I took the plastic that you put over them when they're dry, and I put it over the top, and I put half circles of thick watercolor cardstock on there, and well, I punched them out of a circle and then cut the circles in half, and then I painted each one and glued them down. I love my system, and if you struggle with how to swatch, I think you'd like that too. Anyway, those are the 3 watercolor paints we're going to be trying out on them. Then we're going to go into markers, because everybody, now we all have a system where we use our markers to watercolor with. So Crayola markers are $1 for 10 at Office Depot. Then I got the distress markers, and one of these is $3.99 at Joann's, but that's without a coupon. That's full price, and usually you get a 50% or 40% coupon, so it would be a lot less than that. Then there's the Stampin' Up marker. I'm trying to go with all in these blue colors, darker blues, and the Stampin' Up markers are $2.50, and you get them at StampinUp.com. Then I went with the Prismacolor watercolor pencil. Prismacolors are my favorite watercolor pencils. The biggest that you can get, which is killing me, is 36, and from DickBlick.com they're $22.91. Then there's the Distress Crayon. You get a 6-pack of them full price for $14.99 without a coupon at Joann's.com. And then very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp with a I guess we'll just call it a full stamp. I'm going to use one of my perfect layering circles from Rubber Stamp Tapestry. If you don't know the story of that, I am friends with the owner, Rebecca, and I asked her if she would make me just plain circles that I could do things with, including layering her stamps on them. And so she sent me some, and I love them, and I sent her an example of what I would do with them. They came out in January with a set of 5 perfect layering circles, and they let me name them, and I didn't know. I thought it was just a suggestion they were getting from me, but that's what I called them. I said they were perfect layering circles, and so they named them that. So I'll be using the biggest one of those because it's a complete image, and then you'll be able to see if the paper has some waffling, because if you're only stamping on this paper, you'll probably want to know that. So let's get started. So the different watercolor papers we're going to be using would be the Tim Holtz Watercolor Distress watercolor pad, and you get 20 of those in a package. They're this size, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You can get them at scrapbook.com for $5.39. That was just the lowest price I found them for today online, but you know, you can probably find them in a big box store much cheaper with a coupon. Then the next one is the Fabriano Hot Press 9 by 12. They're 140 pounds. I couldn't find the weight of the Tim Holtz, but the Fabriano Hot Press is 9 by 12 inches. It's 140 pounds, and they're 50 sheets. The thing that's different about Hot Press, rather than any of the other watercolor papers I'm going to be showing you, is hot press paper is smooth. It isn't bumpy like the other ones, and I know there's a word for it, but that's the word we're going to use, is bumpy. And of course, it's, you know, it's a craft term, trust me. So this one is really great for stamping. It's oh, I called it, there's less grain. I made another word up. I said that it has grain, and oh, I just make anything up. You get these at the lowest price online I found it for was at dickblick.com for $22.25, but I bought mine at AC Moore with a 50% off coupon, and I think I paid like $11 for it. So I would recommend you try, again, the big box stores for these. The next watercolor paper we're going to try is the Winsor Newton Cottman watercolor. It's a spiral bound pad. It's cold press. There's only 15 sheets. It's 140 pounds. It's a 5 by 7 sheet, and it's $9.99 at dickblick.com. And this is really, it's got a real big grain, waffly. We'll go with all the different textures. It's textured. There's another word I'm going to use. Then lastly, the Canson XL cold press is 9 by 12 inches, 140 pounds, 30 sheets for $5.97 at Walmart. And this is also textured, waffly, bumpy. You come up with the word. I know there's a good word for it, but right now I can't come up with it. I'm going to go back to price order when I do these, though, because I do want to make sure that we go from least expensive to most expensive, so you kind of have an idea as I go along what we're doing. Okay. So least expensive is, again, the Tim Holtz watercolor. And remember, this is it doesn't say it's cold pressed, but it's very, very bumpy paper. And when you use it for stamping, you might have an issue with it. Here it is with watercolor on it. And I'm going to try and do the same amount of swipes, I guess we'll call it, with each one of these. I'm going to put that one off to the side. Here's our Canson XL. This is a lot easier. I think I better put a little more paint on because the other one has more paint. Okay, we're going to go with that. Next up is the Winsor Newton, and again, it's the Cottman. I just want to make sure that I swipe it as many times as the other one. So far of these, I'm going to one more time with the Crayola. So far of these, the one I had the hardest time using was the Tim Holtz. Now I know Tim Holtz is used for stamping primarily, but let's do a quick comparison right off the bat. Here are, I'm going to put Tim Holtz sideways because then you can see them all really well. His already, you can see the texture, the bumpiness really shows up. It's this one, and the other three you don't have that issue with. So that was our Crayola, and we're going to get that out of the way. If you ever use watercolors, you have to, actual watercolors, you have to let them sit with the lid open until they dry out, or else they can get moldy. At least that's what Lindsay says. And I believe anything Lindsay tells me because she's my hero. Okay. I did email her about this, and she told me what her favorites were, and I'll go over that a little bit later on because I didn't bring it from my computer because that's how I roll. I forgot. Next up, I rinsed my brush. I don't have anything in it, and I did pre-wet these paints. So I'm going to go first with the Tim Holtz. That paint seemed to work better. It went on the paper better. And this one, in case you didn't think that my brush was wet enough, not only was my brush wet, but so was the watercolor, because I sprayed them before I used them. So I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, I'm going to slide everything over more so I'm sure I'm in frame. Okay. Next up is the Canson XL. Okay. Then our next is our Winsor. Okay, I had too much water in my paint, so I had a really watery look to it, and that was not the paint's fault or the paper's fault. That was my fault because it was too wet. Still might be too wet. And lastly is our, I think it's our Fabriano. Pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So with these, once again, the Tim Holtz doesn't really look very good, but hopefully, let me slide these closer together so you can see all of them. This is our Tim Holtz. I'm going to put it up there. There's our Tim Holtz. There's our Winsor Newton. There's our Canson XL, and there's our Fabriano. So back to this one got waffly. Well, I guess I'll go over it at the very end. We'll just recap all of them. Next, we're going to go to our Kuretake Genzai Tambi watercolors. These are our most expensive watercolors. And they're highly pigmented, as you can see. I'm going to put that right there. There's that one. So these are all of our watercolor paints, and I'll let you look at all of them in price order. Our Tim Holtz are our least expensive. You can look at them up close. Then the next one would be the Canson XL. I'm going to turn it this way so you can see all of them really well. Then next one is the Winsor Newtons. Keep in mind these aren't completely dry yet. I'll show you them all at the end. And then lastly is the Fabriano Hot Press. Okay. Next up, we're going to go to markers. And for markers, I thought I would use my plate because it would be easier to be able to go from item to item with scribbling it out on here. So that's what I'm going to do. And here's the marker. It's just your basic broad tip Crayola. And I'm going to hopefully do enough on my plate that I can use it for all 4 of these. So first thing we're going to do is on our Distress, rinse it out. I don't have to rinse it out, I'm crazy. Then on the Canson XL, the Cottman, didn't have enough on that the first time, and then the Fabriano. So that's the cheapest marker. Yeah, $1 for 10 of them at Office Depot. In case you wondered. Then our next is our Distress marker. And if you wonder what it looks like, that's what the Distress marker looks like. The first one is our Distress or Tim Holtz paper. That's that one. And then that's our Canson XL. This one is the Cottman. And this is the Fabriano. Kind of running out of marker medium on that one. Next one is the Stampin' Up Marker. And it looks like this. Okay, this is on our Tim Holtz paper. Then on our Canson XL. I rubbed that one a few more times than the other ones. Then the Cottman, and then on our Fabriano. Okay. Next up is a watercolor pencil, and this is from Prismacolor. These are my favorites. I could have showed you several watercolor pencils, but I just chose to show you my favorite because I just like the way that they work, and so I'm just going with it. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of scribble in the box that we made for it, and hopefully I'm putting down the same amount of pigment, or I don't want to cheat anybody. Okay. Now some of them I put more on in terms of width and height, but as for the amount of, you know, how much pigment is there in the spot that I used, it should be relatively the same. This is the Cottman. This was the Fabriano, and it did not want to liquefy, but I could have pushed harder on that one. You never know on the pencil. That is one of the variables. This one is also having a hard time liquefying, and this is the Canson XL. I don't know if you can still see the lines, but I can still see the lines in that. And then this is our Ranger, and the Ranger really liquefied easily. Next up is our Distress Crayon, and I only had a gold one. I only have metallics in these, so I'm going to have to do the same thing where I scribble it out on my plate. I don't use these crayons very often because I bought them specifically for techniques, and so it's not like I'm really experienced with them. I'll be honest with you. I just bought these recently. If you watch one of my last hauls, you would see it in one of those. Okay, here's our Tim Holtz paper. Hopefully we'll be able to get enough color on it you can see it. Well, it's not very dark, but that's not its fault. It's my fault for picking a color that wasn't very dark. Okay, so we'll let those dry a little bit. The last thing we need to do is I'm going to stamp a solid image on here. The reason I'm doing that is we all, if you're a card maker, we all stamp on our cardstock and watercolor paper when we're doing something with a watercolor technique. So I wanted to see if we could get a good impression on all of these with one stamp. And I'll show you the stamp after I've inked it so you know how inked it is. So that's how inked it is, and I'm going to do the little Tim Holtz paper first. These are my perfect layering circles, as I said, from pegstamps.com. It's not bad. Okay, then there's that, and this is the Canson XL, the next least expensive, and I'm pushing as hard as I can. Okay. There's that one. This is the Cottman paper. I kind of missed the very bottom of the circle, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is to make sure you can see how it looks. Ooh, that one did not do very well. And then this is the Fabriano. I think I want to stamp the other side of all these too, because if there's a rougher side, and I did stamp on the flatter side of all of these, if there's a rougher side, you're going to end up having a poorer image. So let me flip them all over so you can see both sides of all the papers, and I'm just going to kind of do it near the top of these. You can see it's nice and shiny. That's what we're shooting for. See, that's the more waffly side, the more textured side, so that's why it does that. And I wanted you to see that so you knew that that happens. Canson XL, I'm going to put that right there. Okay. Not too bad compared to the other one. The thing that you have happen when you're doing this is that you'll find that the cold press paper has a lot more texture to it. And so you have to decide which side you want to use, and you'll feel it, which side is better and which side is not for stamping. Ooh, that really, well, that's the Fabriano Hot Press. I always expect that to do a nice job because it's a flatter paper. Oh, jeez. You obviously know I'm not an artist. I'm just a crafter. Not just a crafter. I'm a crafter. There, I said it with authority. And this is the Cottman. This is also very textured. You can see all the texturing there. Okay, so now we're going to go over all of them one by one. So here's our in price order. When it comes to the pearlescent watercolor, which is this one, I think it did fine on all four papers. It's a little bit missing in the middle of this one, but that could have been my fault because I think I was running out of medium when I did that, but that's beside the point. Then the Kuretake Genzai did fine on all four, in my opinion. Then I'm going to flip these over and go with our Crayola marker. I think did amazingly well. Considering you get 10 of them for $1, there it is on all four. It's nice. The Tim Holtz Distress marker did fine on all four. Isn't it weird that the color on this one is so much darker in tone than on those? I wonder why. I don't know. Anyway, this one looks a little darker too. Anyway, the Prismacolor, or no, excuse me, the Stampin Up Marker looks fine. The Prismacolor, I don't know if you can see the lines, but it had a really hard time getting rid of the lines on everything except this Tim Holtz paper. The Tim Holtz, it really liquefied, but you can, I don't know if you can see the lines, but there's lines in all but that one. It really liquefied them. The gold, I think that was kind of my fault because I chose such a light crayon, but it had no problem on all four of them. And then let's get to the most telling for us stampers of the things that we all have to think about. When you're stamping any kind of surface that's the whole surface is filled in, like this circle, you have to be careful of what kind of paper you use, because if you use this is the Cottman. If you would have used this paper, you would have been really disappointed in your results. The other three I think did okay for that side, but then when you get to the more textured side of the paper, the Fabriano, I think I had those out of order. The Fabriano is this one. It always has a nice stamped impression. See, both are really clean. So if you're looking for stamping on watercolor paper, this is the one you should buy. Then the Canson XL, you can see on this side it's much more textured, so it doesn't have as good of an impression as it did on this side. And then the Tim Holtz watercolor distress paper, this side is very, very textured, and you can see how badly that side stamped, but this side stamped pretty well. So when you get this home and you want to use it, feel it, and you'll feel which side is flat and which side is textured. You'll want to stamp on the flat side. And then lastly, the Winsor Newton Cottman, this is also the rougher side. It didn't really stamp well on either side, but it stamped much worse on the rougher side. So that is, in a nutshell, what I think of my papers. I think if you're going to be using markers, pretty much any paper will work for you. If you're going to be using watercolor paint, I probably would stay away from, well, the cheaper watercolor paint. I would stay away from the Tim Holtz paper because it didn't seem to do as well. But as for paint, obviously that's what this paper is made for. It does well. And when it comes to the other mediums other than stamping, it does fine. The only thing I think that really is telling is the stamp. And for me, the only one I think that's really clean on both sides is the Fabriano. So I hope that you got something out of it and that you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please tell your friends about me on social media because you know I love that. And don't forget, I put all this information down below, so in case you're looking for what price and you missed something in the video, I'll have it all down below. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.